Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. Big news coming out of Greece over the weekend. The Greek Prime Minister announced that the country will be holding a referendum vote on whether to accept the bailout measures offered by international creditors. If the majority of Greeks vote no, that could mean that Greece would potentially leave the euro and go back to its previous currency, the drachma. The referendum vote is scheduled for July 5th, and in light of all this news, Greek banks are closed for a week. Now joining us to give us their take on the issue are our two guests. Joining us from London, Ontario is Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri is a partner with the Canadian law firm of Siskins, where he heads the firm's securities class actions practice. He's also a board member for The Real News. Also joining us is Leo Panitch. Leo is a research professor of political science at York University in Toronto, and he is the author of the book, The Making of Global Capitalism, The Political Economy of American Empire. Thank you both for joining us.
Morning, Jessica.
So, Dimitri, I'll start off with you. Can you just lay out for us specific conditions of this bailout and who is really being bailed out?
Well, the monies that would be advanced under this bailout would be used primarily, if not exclusively, to pay Greece's creditors, which are the IMF, primarily the IMF, the ECB, the European Central Bank, and the other member states of the Eurozone. So this would constitute, in fact, if the Greek government accepted it, a continuation of the game of extend and pretend, which is what the Eurozone and the Greek government have been playing for several years now. In terms of the main points of the deal that was put on the table by the Troika and the last offer that was put on the table by Greece, they surprisingly are in agreement on what is probably the most fundamental issue, and that is the primary surplus. That's the budgetary result before interest payments on the debt. And the Greek government was prepared to agree to a 1% primary budget surplus this year, 2% next year, 3% in 2017, and 3.5% from 2018 to 2022. Those would require very harsh forms of austerity to be imposed on the populace. But they couldn't come to an agreement because the method by which the Greek government proposed to get to those primary surpluses was not deemed to be credible by the IMF, the ECB, and the EC. Specifically, some of the things the Greek government wanted to do, to which they objected, was the Greek government wanted to raise the corporate tax rate from 26% to 29%. They wanted it only to go up to 28%. The Greek government wanted to impose a one-time tax on corporations. I believe it was about 12% of net income. The Troika objected to that. And the Greek government wanted not to decrease pension expenditure as much as the Troika wanted, and also did not want to raise VAT, consumption taxes, to the degree the Troika wanted. And the interesting part of all of this is that the justification given by the Troika for rejecting the Greek government's approach was that it would hurt the economy. And they wanted to shift the burden from corporations onto consumers and pensioners because they thought too much burden on corporations would hurt the economy, which is kind of, to be completely blunt about it, laughable, because the austerity program has destroyed the economy. If they were so concerned about the preservation of the economy, they wouldn't have imposed that program on Greece to begin with.
Well, let's talk about some of the reaction of this referendum vote. We have Chancellor Angela Merkel from Germany coming out saying if the Greek people decide to vote no on this bailout deal, that essentially that could mean that Greece will no longer be in the Eurozone. Leo, can you talk about some real consequences for the majority of Greek people? If they decide to vote no on this referendum, what is that going to mean for them?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that the premise of Syriza, the Syriza government all along, and Varoufakis said this in his speech on the weekend to the European leaders, was that there is no basis under European treaties and European law for Merkel to actually do what she says she would do if the outcome of the referendum went the way that the Syriza government wants it to go, that is a no vote. There is no basis in law or under European treaties to exclude somebody from the euro peremptorily. There is a procedure for kicking people out of the European Union or exiting the European Union, but that's different than the Eurozone. So in that sense, they are not putting this forward as leaving the euro. And were they to win this, and I think they will win it with the no vote, I'm almost sure they will expect this to lead to further bargaining. That said, of course, people will see this as, and it wouldn't be the first time that governments, didn't adhere to the international treaties they signed when it suited them, especially, as Dimitri just said, when who they're defending are the interests of capitalists inside Greece and outside Greece. And if it comes to it, they'll break treaties. Nevertheless, that is not what the government's proposing, and it won't be easy to happen. I think that's important to understand. I think that the greater concern is not in or out. One poll done last week showed that 40% of Greeks now want to be out of the euro. Others have a lower figure than that. I don't think that's it. I think it's just that the banking system will seize up. And if it were me or you, and it had nothing to do with whether you support the government or not support the government, you need to be able to survive this week. You would have been trying to take some money out of the ATM this weekend.
Well, I'm going to actually pose that question to you guys. How would you vote, Dimitri? Would you vote no for this referendum?
I would vote no, and I would vote no with the hope, not the expectation, that the Troika would come back to the table and come to their senses, and that would mean substantially relaxing the austerity demands that they've put to the Greek government, and primarily offering real debt relief, because it's widely acknowledged that Greece's debt is unsustainable, and it's eventually going to default. And in the interim, the Greek people are going to suffer greatly the more they try to service this debt. So that would be my hope. I think the reality is that those concessions will not be forthcoming, and they're going to cut Greece adrift, hopefully offer it some humanitarian aid so that it can get through the banking crisis and leave it to its own devices. I think that's most likely to be the outcome. But if the choice is between that and continuing the suffocating austerity program, I would unhesitatingly vote no.
Leo, just really quickly, your take. Would you vote no?
Of course. And it's a matter of solidarity with people who are in this chaos of contemporary capitalism, trying to offer an alternative way out. That said, I think beyond this, I think even a arrangement whereby some of the debt would be forgiven or postponed is not enough to get Greece out of the depression that it's in, that it's been thrown into through this European crisis. There has to be some means of kickstarting investment. And the struggle around this is partly about whether you're going to be bribing capitalists to invest in Greece, which they're not keen to do, or whether you're going to find some means of doing that through democratic economic planning.
Okay, let's pause the conversation here. In part two, we'll talk about if they were to vote no, what is that going to look like? What are some real consequences for the Greek people? But Leo and Dimitri, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Come on, Jessica.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.